countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Systems are offline.
Hey, it is now time for your favorite comic book podcast, The Last Comic Shop Podcast.
BWAHAHA! That's right. We're opening up the shop to newbies so that they can understand what the heck that means.
Come on, it's more like BWAHAHA.
Anyway, we're ignoring Andy and keeping the shop open for the oldie moldies who, like me, may have plucked this off the spinner rack at a local Giant Eagle where they were 25% off. So I got my first copy for 75 cents.
Wow.
Justice League America 31.
Ooh.
Not Justice League of America, mind you. Justice League America.
So I guess everybody knows what we're doing now because of that, because it's become the era of these characters is known as the BWAHAHA era.
Yes. But we have to get around to introducing ourselves. I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson. I'm joined by my BWAHAHA co-hosts. That's Jay Scott and Chad Smith. Of course, also Mikey Wood, who could not help but stop by the shop to read this week's book with us, and that is Justice League America. In particular, J.A., we're only doing a subsection of that era.
Yeah, not just Justice League America, because there's also some Justice League Europe issues in there. So it's technically a Justice League International story set. You can get this in the trade. We'll read it. It's the Justice League International trade number 6. One of the main storylines of this trade paperback is Booster Gold and Blue Beetle setting up a casino on Kooey 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 Island. Kooey Kooey Kooey.
I was promised fire in a bikini.
You got it.
I got a cover. She wasn't in it.
You didn't listen to me and read the whole 14 thing. We read all this Justice League Europe garbage.
It does all run together. That's what I have mine all intermingled together. It's funny because I'm not a continuity whore, but during runs I am. Like I like to read things in story. Like my Legion of Superheroes and Legionnaire books are all tied in.
Yeah, it's like you're watching 90210, but then you also have to watch Melrose so that you get the continuity.
Right.
There we go.
You guys missed out on Gnort.
Gnort's awesome.
Gnort?
Yeah.
You missed out on the Guy Gardner date with Ice.
Yeah,
The date with Density.
that 2-issue thing with Lobo. That's earlier on, but
that's 17 and 18. No, that was on my list.
Yeah.
Like when Guy Gardner's all nice and then he beats Lobo, and Lobo gives him the concussion and he's all back to Guy Gardner again.
Yes, but we are reviewing that. But before we get to that, it is time now for some serious talk here on The Last Comic Shop. I was hard-pressed to come up with an opening segment, so I'm deciding to go to the text messages. We've been all texting back and forth all week about the price of comics. That's right. We are well into 2025, and it's past Christmas, but still there are bills and there are financial concerns out there. And
water heaters. Damned water heaters.
That's right. When your water heater explodes, you can always wash to safety on that giant pile of comic book that you've been spending your money on every single week. But is that a smart thing?
The sad irony was I was having water heater troubles, and I do have a lot of assets. It's just, ironically, none of them are liquid. They're all pulpy paper.
that's right.
All right. And one of the biggest prices of comic books is whether or not you buy floppies on a regular basis. You know, every single week, do you go to your local comic book shop? Do you plop down $60 to buy 10 single issues? Or do you wait for trades? Or do you buy them digitally? There's a wide variety of formats. And I think that a lot of us here at The Last Comic Shop actually get our comic books in a variety of different ways. You've got folks like J.A. Scott, who primarily gets most of his comic books digitally. You've got Chad Smith, who's our regular Wednesday warrior, who has his stack of books from his pull pile. You've got me, who oftentimes waits for trades, or even more to the point, omnibuses. And then you've got Mikey, which I think does all three. I'm really exactly sure what Mikey does.
Neither am I. Sort of a combination of the three, honestly, because it's a matter of I'm running out of space and I'm running out of money.
And you, being you can't just collect the 12 issues that tell that story. No. You need the context.
Yes.
So I need the 150 issues that surround those 12 issues, or else I'm not getting the story correct.
Yes. And I will do that. I'll do that a lot. Like, I will sell big runs, but just replace that run with something else. But really, honestly, the cost of modern comics has actually had a side effect with me where I'm getting more stuff that I missed years and years ago, because I could go to a dollar box and spend the same amount of money that I would spend on 10 books on 50 books. Things like that.
No, absolutely, Mikey. Yeah. I mean, that was one of the points that I had made as to why I get trades. And simply put, even though I'm trying to support these local comic book shops, I just can't justify going there, plopping down $60 for 10 books when I could take that $60, and if you multiply that by 4 weeks, that's $240. I could actually invest in a pretty good back issue from either the Silver Age or the Bronze Age for $240, which I know I kind of want. Versus like these other books that might be fleeting, to be honest. Like they might be like, oh, this is neat, but like it's a flash in the pan. But Chad brought up the fact that like people have to buy floppies.
Yeah, that's the problem. So I'm the guy that goes to the shop traditionally each week, and I'm trying new things out, and I want to see what's out there and what all the buzz is and what the buzzy books are. A lot of times, I'm picking up gems. I'm picking up books that I'm super happy about. And then there are other times where I'm picking up clunkers, or, you get stuck buying a book for 30 odd issues. And like, why did I buy all those? I stopped reading that 15 issues ago.
What do you do with those clunkers after you've bought 30 issues or 15 issues? Do you resell them at some point, or are they just stored and stacking up in a box that's farther back in your basement where...
It's that. I am much more of a collector where, like, I love to piece together these runs and then store them for posterity or, a future disaster. But
at what point does collecting become hoarding? Asking for a friend.
Asking for my wife? Is that what you're asking? Because she asks me that all the time.
No, I haven't reached the point where I'm able to sell my stuff in a reasonable way, because I always look at it and I'm like, well, I paid this much for that and this much for this, and so I should at least get this much. And then I know this book is worth X amount, but if I sell it on eBay, I'm going to have to take out the eBay fees. And, it just never seems fiscally responsible to sell these things. I just have to keep them.
And that is the problem with selling. Like, you can only sell things if people are willing to buy it. And a lot of the books that I have are not things that people are buying. They're things that I enjoy. And there's a difference. But generally speaking, the expensive, quote-unquote, key issues, the hot books, are usually really crappy comics. Like, they really are. Like, they're usually a really bad issue that just happens to introduce a character that became huge later on or whatever. And I don't have those.
But there's always the lotto tickets, too. I mean, like, look at your, what's it called, Ultimate Spider-Man #1 from last year. Or that $4 issue ballooned to a $60 issue.
I mean, and there is a bit of playing the stock market. I mean, I always say that, I had this massive collection of Valiant comic books, and then I sold them all about 2 months before the bubble burst in the 90s on comic books. And It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I made so much money off those things. And now you can get them all in dollar bins.
Right. Yeah, but to go back to our original thing, Jay had asked, there's a book he was excited about. He was like, so I'm going to buy it digitally, but should I also buy the issues to keep those floppy issues, or just wait for the trade or whatever collection? And like, as the Wednesday guy, I was like, oh, it's a total waste of money to buy the floppies. Like, unless you have that collector bug where like you want to have my bagged and boarded copies of Absolute Batman 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you're much better waiting for the classier trade paperback or hardback or omnibus or something
more accessible version. But I mean, there was a reason why I was asking too, is because I wanted to, support the artist and support the title, because it's magic. It's not one of those that they're always going to be putting out. This is the first time she's had a series since 1983, and that was a miniseries.
Yeah. And to rewind a little bit, Andy brought up a great point. If you do hold out and wait for those trades,
and you don't buy the floppies, then there's a chance you're not going to get them. I mean, it happened to us. I mean, I was really enjoying that Unstoppable Doom Patrol that we covered on the show, right? I think that was supposed to be an ongoing series. All of a sudden, it capped out at 7. And I think it was, even when we talked to Dennis Culver on the show, he was kind of like, people need to be buying those books every single month, or else they're going to can the book. Because, again, not enough people were reading it.
And that's the thing now with, like, new books and things like that. It's actually a pretty incredible time for comics right now creatively. Like there's phenomenal books out there that, from a personal level, I have to skip over because I can't justify getting them. At the same time, my mentality is still locked down on like characters that I love. And I remember, you guys will remember this, when trade paperbacks weren't really a thing. It was like, if you didn't buy that monthly issue, you weren't
getting it. Yeah.
There were like 5 books that had trade paperbacks.
Yeah, and they weren't trade paperbacks. They were graphic novels.
Yeah,
that was the thing. You get a graphic novel, which was totally separate from the annual month issue story.
It was like Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, those kind of things were collected. But like now I look over to the left and I have Dakota North in a trade paperback, like of all fucking things. Now they collect everything. So then the formatting thing comes through, like, because we love characters. You're buying Magic because you like the character of Magic you always have. That's the hook for you. For me, Swamp Thing, like, why do I need every floppy of Swamp Thing and the Absolute editions and even a couple of trade paper? Why do I need those? Like, what is about? And that's a mentality. Maybe they need to start issuing, like, Ritalin or something with their comics to keep us all, like...
There you go. Yeah, and for me, I had to cut down my list recently. And the sad fact of the matter is, it's the books that I had to cut, were the little guys. Like, I have my Amazing Spider-Man and my Daredevil collections. I'm still going to get those. There's a handful of other books, Ryan North's Fantastic Four. I've been loving that so much. I'm going to get that, in the floppy format. It's a lot of the independent books where it's like, why I can't afford to take the flyer on this right now, to see if it's going to be good. And if it is, my hope is that I can get it in trade. But they do have those subscription services. You could get the Marvel Unlimited, or I don't know what the DC one's called these days, or Comixology, what's left of it there, which honestly, if I were to recommend, someone getting into comic books, I'd say, start there and read what you want, and then go the Andy Larson route, and then get your fancy omnibus collections of the ones that are super important to you.
And that's my last thing before we get to commercial break is I want to just pose this question to all three of you. You can answer honestly. Do you think that the comic book market could survive if you completely cut out physical floppies? Now follow me where I'm going with this. If instead of physical floppies, you released all of that stuff digitally. So basically the single issues were released on a monthly basis on a digital format. And then eventually those digital copies were collected in a trade paperback or an omnibus. And then that's put out in the physical format, either in a bookstore or something like that. It's just an idea. It's a thought. It's a thing that has been swimming around my head because I always got mad about the whole notion like you have to buy the floppy to support the comic book industry, right? Why couldn't you buy the digital and they're still getting the money and the book's still selling and eventually you could get the physical copy?
So this is interesting. I think no. There's too many other bits that go along with the floppy. You've got the whole grading system and that giant side of the business that requires floppies. I do think that the comic book industry could survive, but I don't think anyone is in any need of wanting that to go away. There's too much other stuff that's going on with floppies. There's too many other bits of the business that are connected to making money off of those floppies.
Between buying a floppy versus buying day and date digital, like those are the same price. But with a day and date digital, like you don't actually get anything, and that drives me crazy.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. I refuse to pay for something that I don't have.
You have it as a collection of ones and zeros sitting in the cloud on your computer. I mean, we were saying, everyone's like, well, what happens if there's your computer dies or something? You don't. It's all ephemeral. But I mean, house fires and other things happen too. So, but I get where you're going. There's something to be said about being able to smell it and hold it in your hands. And, worst case scenario, you're in the forest. You can rip out that ad page because you need to wipe after you go to the bathroom.
Oh, God.
But it's a pickle because, we love comic books. We want to support comic books. We want the comic book artists and writers and folks that are putting these things together to be supported and have an industry that's going to work for them, but also on the audience side of things, like, it's tough, man. It's a tough road.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being a 16-year-old, 17-year-old with my $5 every week, getting 4 or 5 books.
That was before they started the 5-6 issue storylines too.
Yeah.
Like, you got more in your book back then.
Yeah, it's so dumb. You can believe it.
We never sang the praises of all the digital stuff. The fact that you can have your Kindle or your iPad or whatever and take, a long box worth of books with you to the beach, which for old fogies like us, the fact that you could enlarge to see the minute details, like, there are definitely bonuses to that digital side of things.
I mean, this is a whole I think we could spend an entire episode talking about Lost. We need to get to this week's book. So coming up right after these commercial breaks, we're going to actually get to BWAHAHAing with Justice League America / Europe / International.
Justice League International.
It's all a conglomeration. Stay tuned.
Shout out to BCW Supplies, by the way, helping us keep all those floppies in tip-top shape.
Looking to save money on your collectible supplies? Whether it's comics, cards, sports memorabilia, or miscellaneous pop culture bric-a-brac, make sure to use promo code LCSPOD to get 10% off your orders at bcwsupplies.com. Not only does it get you a discount on BCW's already low prices, but using LCSPOD at checkout is an amazing way to show support to the Last Comic Shop podcast, the most incredible comic book podcast on the airwaves. So if you are in need of collectible supplies, head out to bcwsupplies.com and use promo code LCSPOD today. That's promo code LCSPOD. Cheers!
Sasquatch, the Loch Ness Monster, Mothman, the Jersey Devil, Chupacabra. For millennia, these creatures have perplexed the human race. But what if they are forces of good? What if they have been sent here by a federation of more advanced alien species to help and defend the human race? That's the premise of League of Cryptids, a new comic book by Grant Lankard, creator of the smash hits Beowulf and Memoirs of the Morbid. His new comic, League of Cryptids, is a 4-part story involving these 5 creatures banding together to defend Earth from an invading alien race, just as one of their members is losing faith in the human race and questioning their mission. The epic tale begins in League of Cryptids 1.
Check out our Kickstarter page for more information.
And we are back. We're going to be talking about my favorite character, Guy Gardner. Not really.
Wow.
But he is fun.
You're going to admit
He's
it?
Fun. No,
Jeez.
I'm not. No. That's one of those that you never admit to liking, right? I don't know. Who knows? So we're talking about Justice League International, and this is, of course, the great Giffen and Dematteis run. We've got art by Hughes, I believe, this time, not McGuire. He started out the series, but we're a little bit farther along than the first 7-8 issues. This is trade volume number 6, if you're following along with the Justice League International trade paperback runs. And Chad, who worked on this book?
Okay, so this particular volume 6 contains Justice League America, issues 31 through 35, and Justice League Europe, issues 7 through 11. So Keith Giffen is the plotter and breakdowner across the board. And then he's got scripters. JM Dematteis is handling the Justice League America. William Mester Loebs is handling the Justice League Europe. And on the art side of things, you get Adam Hughes on JLA and Bart Sears and Art Nichols on JLI. And then a whole squad of inkers. You got Joe Rubenstein, Pablo Marcos, Art Nichols, Bob Smith, Bart Sears, Jose Marzan Jr., and then Gene D'Angelo on colors as well.
All right. And what happens?
So much stuff. The Justice League's America and Europe team up to save small European villages from vampire-like creatures, and then a whole bunch of chicanery and nonsense afterwards, as only the books can do, including the highlight of the Kooey 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 issue, which I think is a beautiful, fun issue. It's just fun. This is a fun run of books, and it maintains the fun.
Yeah. No, I agree. And to be very blunt, this is actually the first time that I've actually read this far in to this particular run. Honestly, most of my JLI, JLA, whatever you want to call it, starts and ends by getting to the punch. Because everybody wants to see the punch, right? But everybody doesn't realize that the punch happens within the first 5 issues of that run. And there's so many issues after that. And so I never got to these issues. So I never read Kooey Kooey Island. And so I was very, very excited to get to this particular portion. And I will say that in some ways, I've got mixed feelings about everything that happened.
Of course you do.
I do. So first off, I want to talk about the relationship between Blue Beetle and Booster Gold, because in my mind, their personalities should be swapped. Like, it seems like Blue Beetle is the get-rich-quick scene guy, and Booster Gold is the person that's the voice of reason in these things, and that just doesn't seem to add up to me based on my experiences with these characters elsewhere. So I was just very confused by Blue Beetle and how he wants to make all this cash so fast and isn't very, voice of reason-y. And then I will say this, although I love the Adam Hughes' art, especially the way that he draws fire, everybody on this show should know that, I wasn't actually a fan of the art on the Justice League Europe issues. I was not, sir. I thought that there were a lot of weird chins. I'm just going to say this. People would be in kind of profile, or it would be a close-up on their face, and their chin just would not look like it existed in nature. Like, it just seemed like it had four chin butts. Like, it was just a weird looking.
That was Bart Sears, man. Bart Sears did all those, like, how to draw comics things in Wizard magazine back in the day. Did
I ever say that I liked Bart Sears? No.
I don't know. He draws a hell of a Captain Atom, though, man.
Some of his chins were very, very weird. But those are just my initial thoughts. I enjoyed it. I'm not going to say I didn't enjoy it. It's fun. I like the fact that Kooey Kooey Island is like Krakoa, and it's a living island.
Yeah. I think Booster and Blue Beetle bounce off each other. I don't think they should be switched around. I just think it's because of the storyline and where Booster is at that point in the story. Because if you get it, Booster's kind of feeling a little he's not excited about being a hero and things like that. But I think they're interchangeable, which is why they get along so well.
And they rub off on each other, and so it goes back and forth. There's an ebb and a flow in their relationship. They're both screw ups, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I like how at the beginning it starts out. I mean, before they're getting in their jet to go over to Europe and help out with the vampire zombie horde thing, and they comment that they've rented out half the hangar to Doom Patrol.
Doom Patrol, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're always having money issues, and so anyway, Max Lord can make a buck.
Yeah, and I think that's this point of comic. Like I say, 1986 is my favorite year of comics singularly, but this point of comics, and I don't know if I mentioned this when we did interview Mr. Dematteis a while back. He was writing everything that I was reading. Like, he was writing both of these books, or at least scripting both of these books. He was writing the Dr. Fate regular series. He was writing the Mr. Miracle regular series. Everything that was kind of tied into those things it's all one big giant story. And it was just a joyful time to read these books because this run, I think these characters are very human. It's silly, but they're very human, and there's kind of more human interaction between these characters than you usually get in a superhero book. What
I liked is I liked how JLA and JLE, Justice League America, Justice League Europe, it's so tightly scripted that you go from JLA to JLE, and yes, of course, it's the same storyline, so it's a bit of a crossover, but they've got all these things that have been put in place, and you can tell that they've got just overall, board of where they want to go with all the stuff that ties in. It kind of reminded me of early 80s X-Men and New Mutants, and when Claremont was cooking, but where Claremont tended to be very serious about his soap opera stuff, this is so tongue-in-cheek. It's so comedic that you can't help but laugh and smile when you're reading it.
Well, that's what makes it great, is the fact that, like, this book, and trust me, there are moments, which I don't think we had many in here, where it does get serious and it does get dramatic. But it's not a soap opera like you get in so many superhero adventures. You know, you get that soap opera drama. This is a sitcom. You know, This is a sitcom with those serious beats from time to time. And for me, like I alluded to at the top of the show, this is one of the first books I picked up off the shelf. I didn't realize this was how books weren't supposed to be. This book was incredible to me. Just the humor and the interactions. And you had the pairings of Booster and Blue Beetle and Fire and Ice. And then you throw in the dumbassery of Guy Gardner. And you're bouncing off a Martian Manhunter. And like, I was almost a little sad we focused on this particular volume that had the Justice League Europe. Because like, they're okay, but that wasn't really my jam. There's so much fun in the Justice League America and the JLI era. There's so many other issues that I'm like, oh, we should have read this. We should have gotten to Gnort. We should have gotten to, although we did have some Kilowog. That was fun with the Kilowog Guy Gardner.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that all comics weren't like this. And, you know, you spend the rest of your life chasing down books that might have, you know, an ounce of that humor to them, and being able to balance it with the superhero adventure, with the drama. There's just so much of these books. It's just the perfect mix of silliness and vaudevillian tomfoolery and everything else. Like, I don't know.
And it's very self-aware too. It's very self-aware.
Right.
It knows that it's a comic book. Makes little sort of like meta references, like when the villain in the little 4-parter, when he kind of laughs to himself and he's like, God, I'm laughing like a comic book villain now. You know, it's like it's so self-aware.
Major Disaster.
Yeah, well, yeah, Major Disaster. Yeah, that's later on in that. But yeah, it was just a great book to read, and going back and rereading them is a joy.
Well, I will say too that I was actually quite taken with the fact that unlike some other comic books of this time, I think this comic book series has actually aged very, very well. Maybe it's because of the Adams Hughes heart on those Justice League America books, but it has a very modern look to it. If you were to tell me that this book had been released, I don't know, like 2 years ago, I would have believed you. I would have said, like, yeah, this could have been released in the last, like, 5 years. Because, again, the art is real crisp and modern looking. The storylines are, again, what you kind of see on, you know, sitcoms nowadays, whether that be, like, Community or Parks and Rec or something like that. I mean, when you talk about sitcom, that's what it kind of, these continuing storylines, these arcs that go over, and kind of the family mentality, too. My favorite character, who doesn't get a lot of play in these, again, Mr. Miracle. Mm-hmm. It's just nice to see Scott just hanging out in the background, being the third wheel to that Booster Gold Blue Beetle thing.
Complaining that he'd rather be at home with Barda than fighting vampires.
And Oberon gets just as much play in this series, you know, hanging back with Maxwell Lord. And that's another thing, too, about this book, is it's not playing with the top-tier guys, but there is top-tier talent. Like, going back to the beginnings of JLI, you know, you had Kevin McGuire, which when this came out in the late 80s, early 90s, that was the blow up of the Image boom and all those, you know, your McFarlanes and Liefelds and Jim Lees. And I never understood why Kevin McGuire wasn't just as celebrated as any of those guys, because his facial expressions, you know, were the best in the business. His art style was just as detailed. And then you follow it up, you bring on Adam Hughes, which at the time I didn't know Adam Hughes. Like, that's a huge deal. Mm-hmm. It's such great art in these issues. And sure, they're characters that not a lot of people care about. I mean, the Dr. Fate, we get the female version of Dr. Fate in here. No one cared about these people before this book, but they made them into that family. And, you know, to this day, you still have people that clamor for JLI stuff.
It almost felt like, I mean, when Batman was in it, I felt like he stood out as a bit of a sore thumb. Like why are you here? You should. He's like the straight dad, right? He's like the straight guy. He's playing the straight guy role.
He makes more sense than what I think was single-handedly my least favorite issue of this entire bunch, which was that issue where Superman does the surgery. Superman showing up in this book, that was, no, buddy, you need to go save the world. Like, you're not supposed to be hanging out with these teachers. Like, and And even with Power Girl, I was just like, this is like a whole different, I don't want any of these. Batman makes sense. I'm going to say Batman makes sense. Martian Manhunter makes sense because of the way they write Batman and Martian Manhunter.
Oh, they're
not the Batman that you see in other books. They are almost like facades, like character.
They're exasperated parents. They're they are. That's who they are. They're just two exasperated parents, or they're teachers of a class full of students with ADHD. Like they're just like the straight men to the rest of the thing. And
but they get Martian Manhunter, man. They get their hooks in him. He becomes one of them.
Yes.
As the series goes on, he's one of them.
With his Oreo addiction.
Exactly.
So, yeah, man, I don't know. I don't know if you guys ever saw they did a pilot episode of a Justice League television show. A lot of people say it's terrible, and it kind of is, but at the same time, it's kind of not, because it's almost like this book made into a television show. It's like Seinfeld, but with superheroes. Like, it's really bizarre. If you ever get it, it's probably on YouTube. I have an old VHS tape of it that I bought at a con. Wally West is making moves on Power Girl through the whole thing, but then he gets really sweet at one point, and the wacky, humorous side. Elongated Man's dialogue with Batman in the beginning of the four-parter, where he's like, just like old times from back in the days when he was a detective a lot, and Batman's just like, yeah, this is great, just like not being into it. But yeah,
everyone's like, can you stop twitching that nose? It's freaking me out.
It's like my wife likes it.
I keep on going back to it. I did enjoy the issues of Justice League America way more than the Justice League Europe issues. I really did. I felt like, again, because I don't think like JM Dematteis was actually scripting. That was a guy that was providing different dialogue. And those books, the Justice League Europe, had a more serious tone. That was the issue where we got Superman doing the surgery. That's where Metamorpho goes crazy and starts deciding to beat up Guy Gardner, even though Guy Gardner's a jerk. It still was kind of like, whoa, tone it down here. Compared to like the Kooey Kooey Island ones, or even, again, it's honestly pretty serious when Huntress and Oberon and Maxwell Lord and Ice are stuck on an iceberg in the middle of the ocean, like with sharks around. That's a very serious thing, but it never felt like it was kind of in your face serious. It was dealing with something. And so I just want to point that out.
He scripted Europe up until issue 8. He bounced on issue 8 because, like I said, he was writing like 4 books, if not more, at the time. And he bailed and brought in Bill Loeb, who's not, and that's the thing with it. So the thing you mentioned with Adam Hughes, which is cool, it's like, it's really neat when somebody as identifiable and sort of stylistic as Maguire leaves a book and is replaced by somebody who has a similar but still unique style. And Hughes's work in these issues, I think, is some of the best stuff I've ever seen. But he doesn't really do interiors much anymore. He does just those cheesecake covers most of the time, which are beautiful. But I think his work in these books are better than his work on Ghost when he was doing Ghost for Dark Horse later on and things like that. But then maybe it's the inker. But it's cool when that happens. And unfortunately, with both of these titles, when this team, when the Dematteis and Giffen, when they leave, that's later on in like issue 60 or something like that. People who come on afterwards, it just doesn't feel right.
Well, I'd say it was Dan Jurgens wanted to make it into a genuine superhero book.
Yeah.
And so you lose a lot of the alchemy that this team brought to the table, where it wasn't like every other comic. There hasn't been a comic like this that's been successful, I can recall, in the years since. Outside of like your Superior Foes of Spider-Man or those books that are immediately cast off as joke books, it's really hard to accomplish this the way they did. So it wasn't going to last forever, and it certainly didn't.
Yeah, I think you can kind of see, obviously stuff like Deadpool with the breaking the fourth wall and being much more tongue-in-cheek draws from this history. So while you don't see it as much anymore as you used to, I think it has made a big impression on the industry, and there's definitely space now for books like this, which I'm glad for.
That's true. One of the big hang-ups on the JLI initially was they weren't allowed to play with the big guns. They weren't allowed to play with Superman because John Byrne had Superman, so he was out of the league. They weren't allowed to do Wonder Woman because George Perez was doing Wonder Woman. And eventually they would bring characters in, but then lose them to different crossovers and all that other stuff. But the fact is that they're playing like within the rules of regular DC continuity. Like this isn't set off on its own Kooey 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 Island, but it kind of is. Mm-hmm. But big companies don't let their characters play like this anymore. You know, outside of your Deadpools or Harley Quinns or, you know, those characters that get kind of pushed off to the side of like, no, you're a funny character, you go over there. This book, they were allowed to be funny, they were allowed to be serious, they were allowed to be dramatic. It was all mixed in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing that we're hoping that you'll allow us is get to our ratings of this particular volume, and that'll be coming right up after these commercial breaks, so stay tuned. More of The Last Comic Shop right after this.
Hooray!
LastComicShopPodcast.com is the destination for all things shop. Plan your week with upcoming show schedules, the latest books, recommendations, and chatter from the crew. Subscribe to the show on all major podcasting platforms from one convenient location. Show your support and browse the merch store. T-shirts, tanks, hoodies for the fam, coffee mugs, magnets, totes, and more. Check out exclusive content through the show's YouTube channel and follow the pod on Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, and others. All this and so much more at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com.
Madison is on the air.
What happens when 20-something Madison is zapped into old-time radio shows? No technology.
I want to go to voicemail.
No Starbucks.
Don't call yourself a coffee shop if you only sell drip coffee.
And no one is PC.
I don't need no lip from...
Were you about to say woman? Because I'm wearing a gun and I have no idea how to use it.
Madison on the Air serves to highlight the way we were and the way we are today, with original radio drama scripts adapted to include the modern-day Madison as she joins famous characters from radio's past, including Sergeant Joe Friday.
Just the facts, ma'am. I've never actually said that.
Marshal Matt Dillon.
We're not having a shootout with a 10-year-old kid.
I'm too woke to be a part of this.
Superman.
I didn't realize how cold it would be flying like this.
I have to get into the higher atmosphere.
And many more. Visit us on the web at madisonontheair.com or find us pretty much any place podcasts can be found.
You talk so old-timey. I have no idea what you said, but it's adorbs.
BWAHAHA. That's the way I say it here.
Yeah, but it's a villain saying it, so it should be the BWAHAHA.
No, it's Blue Beetle saying it.
The origin is after the punch, when Guy Gardner tried to, what do you call it, goes up against Batman for leadership of the League, and then after one punch immediately drops to the ground, and it's the visceral.
That's it.
We're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, though, and it is time for ratings of this particular volume of JLI. Now, again, this isn't a rating of all of JLI. That we're not going on record saying, like, this is our stamp. I feel like you should read it, regardless of what we say about these particular issues. Like, you should read JLI. This is one of the best comic book runs out there. But we got a 1 out of 4 scale for these particular, like, 10-some issues, and that comes from J.A. Scott. So, J.A., what we got?
As much as I want to do 1 out of 4 BWAHAHAs, we're going to go, because it's just this one subset of the entire JLI run, we're going to go 1 out of 4 Kooeys. Is it a Kooey Kooey? Is it a Kooey Kooey Kooey? Or is it a Kooey 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 Kooey? Oh, I've lost the count of my Kooeys.
That's a lot.
1 out of 4 Kooeys. But you can't just say Kooey. You have to go, it's a Kooey Kooey book, or it's a Kooey 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 .5 book.
All right. Well, we're going to start off with Mikey Wood, because this is one of his favorite runs. So what do you give this particular section of issues, Mikey?
It's always going to be a 4, but this is just a weaker 4. That's all. This isn't. It's an odd collection of issues because you've got one kind of main storyline. They do tie in together afterwards, but it's not the one that I would tell people to buy first. So hopefully they're buying it 6th, because it is the 6th trade paperback. But yeah, it's always a 4. This book. It just always is. It's a Kooey 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 Kooey.
Well, I'll go next, and I'm not going to be as glowing as a 4 for this particular round. This is like, I could easily give the Adam Hughes issues with the actual Kooey Kooey. I could give those a good solid 3.5. I thought those were excellent issues. The Justice League Europe issues, I'm going to give like a 2 because I didn't like those at all. Like, they were very average, and boy, just huge chins. Never came around to the chins.
So weird.
So we will say that averages out to about, unfortunately, about a 2.95 Kooey Kooey. So it's like almost 3 Kooey Kooey Kooeys, but it's just Kooey Kooey Island. I do recommend that you read it. I do highly recommend that you read the Kooey Kooey Island issues because they're really great. Plus that awesome cover with Fire giving Booster Gold and Blue Beetle some drinks, and they're, Daxel Lord's trying to come fight them in the background. It's hilarious. I love that issue. But boy, that was just it was like a train wreck reading that Superman issue. Like, I was just like, why? No.
I don't understand you.
You know what? I'm not supposed to, and you don't have to. It's my grade. In case we got Chad up next.
Oh, I was just going to say that was a total plot device where you could tell they were trying to nerf Power Girl a little bit, where it's like she's going to be in a coma and Superman's going to do surgery, and then once it's done, she's still going to be powerful, just not as powerful.
Dumb. Why nerf Power Girl? Editorial.
There you go. No, the JLI was notorious for having editorial to meddle with their run and take characters away, and I don't know. I love this stuff so much. I do. Like I said, this is one of the first books that I read. I didn't realize all comic books weren't like this, with the mix of the comedy and the drama and the buddies, playing off each other. And say what you will about Guy Gardner, he's one of the best characters in comic books. When you're talking about Guy Gardner from 1989 to 1990 or whatever, he's just the best. Big, dumb, goofy jerk. He takes Ice to a date in a Porto theater. There's so much fun. With that said, I do understand Andy's disgruntlement with all the Bart Sears chins. And believe me, I read those Wizard magazines. I even noticed that he was using that Whitman fake name on some of the earlier Wizard issues. Like, wait a minute, I know that guy.
Yeah.
He was that guy that he was trying too hard to be like the Image guys and had all the extra detail. And it's like, no, you're not Ron Lim. Settle down there, buddy. But anywho, so I do think some of the JLI issues bring it down slightly. So I'm not going to go the full 4. But I love it so much. It's going to be 3.75. Kooey, 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 Koo. For my rating.
All right, J.A., wrap us up.
All right. This is fun. You can't not smile when you're reading these books. Random second-tier B-list characters get these nice shining moments. Kilowog shows up and fixes everything in like 6 hours.
Builds them an entire resort.
Yeah, just because he's, bored, wants someone to have fun with. Was there a shift of tone a bit between the two books, between JLA and JLE? Yeah, a little bit, but I didn't think it was bad per se. I didn't have an issue with the chins, Andrew. I'm sorry. I didn't see the chins, though. I know what you're talking about now that I relook at it, but I thought some of that is just elongated, man. He just is elongated. Mm-hmm. And I liked that Superman issue. I thought it had real pathos, especially because you have Captain Atom is so invested in, what's going to happen to Power Girl. Did I think it was dumb that they had to reduce her powers? Yeah, I guess that's an editorial thing, as Chad said. So, it's fun. It was a little bit more uneven than the earlier issues, to Mikey Wood's point. So, unlike Mikey Wood, the ultimate fan, I can't give it 4 Kooeys. I'm just going to go 3.5. So it's a Kooey 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 Koo.
Yes.
All right. Well, one thing that's not Kooey 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 is our recommendations. That's right. We don't have a rating scale for these. It's just these are books that we like and books that we hope that you go out to your local comic book shop and pick up, in addition to JLI and all the variety of ways that you can pick it up. They've got it in omnibuses. You can pick it up in these trades. If you're looking for these particular issues, it's in trade volume 6. You can find them in single issues, although I don't know, are those Kooey Kooey Island issues issues fairly hard to come by nowadays? Are they like because of the Adam Hughes art? And no, evidently no.
And that is a perfect segue to my recommendation, which is get the entire run of JLI. It is so approachable and, as you just mentioned, easy to find in various formats. I'm sure you can find some of them in buck bins, or low-cost single issues at your local comic book shop. Or you can pick it up in trade, be that trade paperbacks in printed format or through Comixology or digital format in trade. The nice thing about the trades is that they have the run as they're meant to be read. So you've got a JLA issue and then a JLE issue, so that you're making sure you're sort of following along the sitcom as it goes. Or if you're into big tomes, you can get them in omnibus format. They've got 3 volumes of pretty much this entire Giffen Dematteis run. So that is my recommendation. Read this great, groundbreaking series in whatever format you find helpful.
Yeah, and I think Chad actually is going to follow up with his recommendation on that.
Heck yeah. So once you've gone through and you've picked up those JLI issues or trades or omnibuses, which I have this in single issues, I have the trades, I have a problem. You could also look for the reboots, the subsequent early 2000s. The first run was called, formerly known as the Justice League, where Maxwell Lord rents out a space in a mall, strip mall, and they become superheroes for hire. While it never quite reaches the heights of the JLI proper, it's still tons of fun. And then they followed that up with the series that ran through for JLA Classified called I Can't Believe It's Not the Justice League. There was a 6-issue arc there that's been collected. And then Dan Didio ruins it by shooting Blue Beetle in the head. Or having Maxwell Lord shoot Blue Beetle in the head to start Final Crisis or whatever that was. Yeah, that's real dumb. Not that I'm bitter still. But formerly known as the Justice League and I Can't Believe It's Not the Justice League are both out there as well. It's the original creative team with Giffen, Dematteis, and Kevin McGuire and Joe Rubenstein on pencils and inks there. But yeah, there's still tons of fun. The fun manic energy continues.
Yeah. Well, my recommendation is kind of related, but also related to past episodes of The Last Comic Shop. I know that the last time we had Mikey Wood on an episode of The Last Comic Shop to read a DC book was back when we read Danger Street, well, back in 2024. And during that time, we talked about the fact that Danger Street was based off of a series called DC First Issue Specials. And I, following that show, went out and got the hardback of those issues so that I could read the original stories that appeared in DC's First Issue Special. And I've got to say that although some of them are truly goofy, like The Outsiders, that was a weird story. The Green Team, weird story. There are actually some really great gems in here. I was a huge fan of Atlas, which was done by Jack Kirby. In fact, all the Jack Kirby in here is great. Atlas, the Manhunter series that Jack Kirby did in this, I found extremely good. You got Walt Simonson doing Dr. Fate, which I thought was an awesome issue where he fights a mummy. You've got the first appearance of Warlord, done by Mike Grell, and that's kind of a neat issue to read. Even the Blue Starman I thought was fun, and the New Gods at the end. And I don't know about the Metamorpho issue. I'm not 1,000% sold on that, but I can highly recommend that you pick it up. It does collect this kind of really neat series, and it just gives you a taste of some of these characters. I love the fact that it starts off with that Atlas issue, and at the end it just says, "You want to see more Atlas? Right to Atlas." It makes no bones about what they're trying to do here. They're just like, "You like this? Well, you're not going to get any more unless you..."
Yeah, it was Marvel Premiere, yeah.
Yeah. So it was nice. But I wish that some of these series had been ongoing. I really do wish that we would have got more Atlas. I thought that was a neat idea, and the Manhunter, and even Creeper by the Steve Ditko. It's sad, but it's also good in some ways that we even have this. So DC's first issue specials in hardback. Really nice collection. Pick it up today. Mikey?
My recommendation is, and I mentioned this earlier, that for a while there, JM Dematteis was writing a bunch of stuff all related to these things. So it's almost a dual recommendation. I highly recommend his runs on Dr. Fate, which he wrote for 24 issues from numbers 1 through 24, which was like 1988 down to like 89. And then Mr. Miracle, which he wrote the first 8 issues of. That Mr. Miracle run ran from 89 to, I want to say, 91 or something, around about 27 issues or 28 issues or something. So he wrote the first 8 issues of that, and then Len Wein took over, or Len Wein did a few issues, and then Bill Messner-Loebs took over from there. They're just really good runs of books, and they sort of tie into what was going on in the Justice League at the time. And he's a phenomenal writer. He's just a great writer. You know, he was one of the first names that I tracked down when I was a young guy reading comics. I was like 13, 14 at this time. So yeah, Dr. Fate and Mr. Miracle regular series from the late 80s. Good stuff.
Yeah. And we're hoping that you stick around for more good stuff coming in the upcoming weeks here on The Last Comic Shop. Yeah, that's right. We're done with the first 2 months, and we've got 10 more months to go here in 2025, full of books and another miscellaneous comic book bric-a-brac. And you can rate, review, and subscribe so you don't miss any of it over at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. Just mentioning some of the books we've got coming up in the next couple of weeks. Again, to Jay's point, we're going to be reading Bone by Jeff Smith. That's going to be on the show. We're going to be reading Petrolhead. We're going to be reading Cassie Kane Batgirl with George from Shortbox Summary. Who knows? We might even dip in deeper into the DC archives and check out Shade, the Changing Man by Steve Ditko. Great little 8-issue arc there. All that stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks over the month of March. So don't miss any of this. Subscribe on any of those podcasting platforms or YouTube, however you listen to our show. We just hope that you continue listening.
And you can also find us on the various social media platforms, places like Blue Sky and Threads, and a bunch of other spots where you can see Golden Age covers, you can see comic collections, you can see fun interactions out there on the internet. And if that makes you uncomfortable, you can always come back home to the website, baby. It's www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com, where you can find links to episodes. And what else, J.A.?
We always have a link to our merch store. We sell T-shirts, hats, tote bags to carry your comic books from that local comic book shop home with you. And this week, a special on Hawaiian shorts. So the next time you're stuck on Kooey 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 Island, you've got something to wear.
There you go.
That's still my $1 million idea. My Booster Gold idea is to make long story shorts where you just put whole books just printed right on the short panels.
I was disappointed that Batman didn't show up in his bat cowl with no shirt on.
But did you see him? When he put on the suit, the containment suit, his ears had to fold down? You don't get that in other books. That was great.
One thing that you don't get anywhere else is a promo code to save you some money on your comic books over at BCW Supplies. What is that promo code, Mikey?
It's LCSPOD. LCS for Last Comic Shop. POD for Pod. LCSPOD gets you 10% off of all of your storage stuff. And it's good storage stuff.
Yeah. So if you are continuing to be a Wednesday warrior like Chad, you will need more bags and boards and boxes to put even those junk runs that you maybe read 3 issues of and just said, I don't know why.
It's not hoarding. It's not hoarding.
It's not. No, it's not. You know, at the end of the day, as J.A. pointed out, it is just a box of toilet paper after all.
We need more internet engagement, so we need to do a couple of episodes that are nothing but negative. We need negative stuff because that's what the kids are listening to.
Oh, yeah.
We need to do something about books that we started reading.
We got to stop reading these fun books like JLI or Bone. I mean, this is just uplifting, fun.
So we hope that you stick around for episodes in future where we're just going to crap on books.
I don't have much of a Black Adam collection.
Black.
In case, I'm the host with the most, Danny Larson. I'm joined by Chad Smith, J.A. Scott, and the wonderful Mikey Wood. And we hope that you stay safe, stay laughing, because it's better than the alternative. And remember...
Could you imagine a world where all we had to do is get rid of margarine? It'd be such a better place.
Not you too, Chad. No. Not two of you doing these jokes in 2025.
All right,
no.
Shop podcast was a 2025 Black Angus production.